Did you know that teenagers with low self-esteem are significantly more likely to turn to drugs as a way to cope? This troubling trend isn't just affecting girls. Boys are increasingly following into this dangerous pattern too. With the recent surge in media coverage of new weight loss drugs, kids are constantly bombarded with potentially harmful messaging. Welcome to Awkward Conversations, where our mission is to arm parents with the tools they need to raise happy, healthy, and substance-free kids. I'm Jodie Sweetin, and today we're exploring the dangerous intersection of body image issues and substance use among teens. Body image issues can lead to severe mental health problems, including low self-esteem and body dysmorphic disorder. These issues are often exacerbated by the constant barrage of idealized images on social media and the pervasive coverage of new weight loss drugs. The pressure to achieve a perfect body can push many teens to seek quick fixes through dangerous means like anabolic steroids or other substances. Now, according to the CDC, low self-esteem can lead to various risky behaviors, including drug use, which is often a misguided attempt to fit in or feel better about oneself. By understanding this connection, we can better support our children in developing a healthy body image and self-esteem, steering them away from the dangerous path of substance use. And joining me today is my lovely co-host, Amy McCarthy, who is the Senior Clinical Social Director at Boston Children's Hospital. Thank you so much for being here, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Today we are honored to welcome Dr. Jean Kilbourne, a pioneer in the field of media literacy and public health. Dr. Kilbourne is renowned for her groundbreaking work on the image of women in advertising and the effects of media on health and society. Dr. Kilbourne is the creator of the acclaimed documentary series, Killing Us Softly, which critically examines how advertising images distort and shape perceptions of women. She has authored several influential books, including Can't Buy My Love, and has been featured in numerous media outlets and academic publications. Welcome, Dr. Kilbourne.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you, and this is such an important topic and one that's so close to my heart.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to discussing this with you today. And I know, we've talked a lot about how this is an issue that I think we predominantly associate with women or young women, but that it's something that is really affecting all, across the gender spectrum. All sorts of young people. So I just want to make that very clear up at the top that this is not specifically only geared towards women. It's just that is often where the media is directed.
Absolutely.
Now, Jean, since you said it's okay to call you that, Jean, can you just briefly explain to us and to those watching at home what body image issues are and how they differ from, just general body dissatisfaction?
Sure. I mean, first of all, tragically, really, body dysfaction is rampant in our culture. I mean, it's very hard to find people, particularly women and girls, but also people of, all genders who are dissatisfied and unhappy with their bodies. So clinically diagnosable eating disorders are relatively rare, but body dysfaction is everywhere and it's very harmful. It affects self-esteem, and also I think often about how much time and psychic energy are wasted as we sort of obsess about our bodies. And imagine how our lives would be different if we loved and appreciated our bodies. I mean, all of us, it would just, I think, change our lives.
Absolutely.
So body image issues can, of course, can be more severe, including a lot of eating disorders, but also body dysmorphia, which is when individuals see a literally distorted view of their body. So you might have a woman who's slender, but who looks in the mirror and sees herself as fat, and nothing can convince her that she's not fat because she has a totally dysmorphic image, a complete disconnect between her actual body and her experience of it.
I find such an interesting crossover between, when we think about people who live with substance use disorders, it's not uncommon to think of that as like a moral failing or, that's something that is ethically kind of bound.
Right.
And I think society similarly thinks of body image in this way too. If you're overweight or if you live in a larger body, that you may have some kind of moral misgivings or something to that effect as well. And, it's fascinating just to think of that kind of crossover. Overall.
Yeah. And Jean, you mentioned, and we spoke about at the top of this show, that you are an absolute pioneer in this field. I mean, you were really ahead of your time discussing the issues that were coming up and raising the alarm bells well before anyone, was talking about the consequences and the effects of media on young people. Can you tell us a little bit about why this was the thing that really drew you to raising awareness, and this was the focus of so much of your study?
I was the first person to seriously study the image of women in advertising, and I started collecting ads and doing that research in the late 60s. And I often feel that my entire life kind of led to that. And part of it, I never worked in advertising, but I did do some modeling when I was very young. I mean, sort of obviously when I was young, because hardly anyone does it at any other time. And in those days, there wasn't any kind of language like objectification or alienation, but I was encouraged to do it, and it was one of the few ways that I could make money. It was, but it was soul destroying, and there was a tremendous amount of sexual harassment that came with the territory. So I would do it for a little while and then back away from it because it really ultimately was quite horrible. But it did leave me with a lasting sense of the importance of the image and of the fact that there are no winners. If you're if you're a beautiful young woman, let's say, and you're the least bit self-reflective, you're going to know that that's not going to last very long. And somebody said to me once when I was 20 or something, your beauty is an international passport. And I said, maybe, but it's one that's going to be revoked. And I think that's the thing, that there are no winners in this game. There are only losers.
Right. And
So I started looking at ads, and I put together a slide presentation, and then eventually made a film, Killing Us Softly, which I first made in 1979, and I've remade it 3 times since. And it was a very simple one camera cheap film, but it went viral in today's terms and became enormously successful and very widely used. And then I went on to also study the impact of advertising, the advertising of tobacco and alcohol and diet products and junk food, because I began to see that behind virtually every public health problem, there's an industry profiting from that problem.
Sure.
And that was sort of my first major insight, and that was what led to my sort of fascination with the topic.
I would assume, and we've talked about it so much more now, but the impact and the proliferation of media and advertisement and how much it is involved. You can't drive down the freeway without it being, now the entire side of a building is a billboard. And, particularly here in the U.S., we're so just bombarded with it all the time. Have you seen a shift in the prevalence of body image issues since you started studying this issue? Is it something that you've seen an increase of with social media? Or is this something that we've sort of been circling around and we just keep, calling it by a different name and putting a different face on it, and it's, still sort of the same pervasive problems?
No, that's a really important question. And I think since I've been looking at this for, 60 years, it's been a problem for a very long time, but it is so much worse now than it was quite some time ago. When I started looking at these images, I mean, the ideal image was, of course, photoshopped. I mean, it was airbrushed and that sort of thing. But now, I mean, it's with digital altering. I mean, you can make somebody completely transform someone. So that's made a big difference. Social media has had a huge impact. And one of the main things that it's done is that kids were growing up looking at images of celebrities, let's say supermodels, or for boys and young men, maybe athletes, that sort of thing. But they were comparing themselves to these celebrities. But now, with the use of social media and filters that enable us to change our own bodies and our own faces, young people in particular end up comparing themselves to their idealized images of their peers, which is in many ways so much worse, because the message is kind of, if you don't look like this, you're really a failure. I mean, it wasn't expected that you were actually going to be able to look like Chrissy Brinkley, let's say, or Cindy Crawford, but now you get the message, well, maybe you should be able to look like the girl in your English class or the boy on your football team.
Right. I have 16 and 13-year-old daughters, so I am acutely aware of, what sort of media messages that they are seeing. And, as somebody with a public platform myself, I have always made it really important to post pictures that I don't have filters. If I have a big zit on my forehead, I will be like, and this is Frank and he's here today, But just because I think we have gotten so conditioned with social media to normalizing perfection. Mm-hmm. I mean, you like you were talking about celebrities in sort of, days of old. I was looking through something and it was a picture of Elizabeth Taylor, who is stunningly gorgeous. But it was a picture from, the 60s or 70s. They're leaving some party and she has pores and skin tone and isn't perfect. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a difference, because you don't see that now. It's like people have perfectly buff skin all the time. And, all of these completely unrealistic, fake images that's all that young people see. Mm-hmm. They don't see the reality anymore.
It's so interesting what you say, because that's so true. But we are all surrounded by these idealized images. At the same time, if a celebrity, let's say, gains weight or is caught shopping at the supermarket without makeup, then she's shamed, and there's tremendous message that this is sort of an awful transgression. And what a terrible message that is to our kids as well.
Of course.
You're supposed to be perfect looking, and if you're not, then you are really shamed.
Absolutely. There is a huge co-occurrence of body image issues and substance use, or one leading to the other, especially with, the new prevalence of weight loss medications and things like that we're seeing on the market now, where people are, sort of advertising the fact that there are now drugs that will just make you lose weight almost instantly.
This new class of weight loss drugs that really have been developed to help people with diabetes, and yet they're being used by everybody who wants to lose even like 5 or 10 pounds. And one of the horrors of that is that there's now a shortage of the drugs that are actually necessary for people. And the prices, of course, have gone through the roof, which is great news for big pharma, but very bad news for the rest of us.
Right.
And the ads, of course, underscore the whole idea that your goal should be to be as thin as possible. And if you aren't, then you are failing in some way. So take this drug and it will solve your problem. So that's one way in which there's a link between, drugs and body image. Another is that alcohol use disorder frequently co-occurs with eating disorders, as I'm sure you both know. So people with eating disorders often turn to alcohol use as a way of coping with stress and that kind of thing. So in fact, some studies indicate that about 40% of individuals with eating disorders also have alcohol or substance abuse disorders. They come together. Particularly people with bulimia are more likely to, be. And so this association, although it exists for boys and men and everybody, it's particularly occurs with young women. I just learned this. There's this slang term called drunkorexia, which means it's used to describe the unhealthy phenomenon when especially girls and young women drink instead of eating. They restrict their diet, partly so they'll be able to drink more, and partly because the alcohol helps to curb their appetite. But of course, this does terrible damage in all kinds of ways. I mean, they're not getting the nutrition that they need. They're running all kinds of risks with alcohol, and they're setting themselves up for alcoholism. So that's a particularly dangerous kind of co-occurrence.
Yeah, people.
And also with these people who have alcoholism, alcohol use disorder, there's often common sort of triggers, from childhood. Child sexual abuse, child abuse, family dysfunction are often catalysts for all these things. Trauma for all these things, for alcohol, substance abuse, and eating disorders. They're all related. and they're all incredibly serious.
Right.
Indeed. Yeah. So many people don't realize that with eating disorders, the absence of your body and brain getting the nutrients causes you to not always be able to think in a logical or rational kind of, manner, especially when you're, exclusively using alcohol,
right.
Like in lieu of that. We also see a lot in our office, people using different, substances to either curb their appetite. Stimulants are commonly used to curb appetite, whether that's cocaine or methamphetamine or, prescribed medications like Adderall or Ritalin or things like that. And on the opposite end, I hear a lot of young people talking about, well, I, started using cannabis maybe, and now I'm more hungry and that's making me uncomfortable because maybe I've gained weight. And so there's a lot of this kind of overlap and interaction. In general, steroids are popularly associated with doping by elite athletes. I think since the 1980s.
Actually, I was reading an article just this week about the increase in HCG, human growth hormone, all of these things that we now have sort of given other names, but that are very much in the family, of anabolic steroids or some type of steroid. And that, because it's human growth hormone, we don't see it as something that is negative, but it can have just as many adverse side effects. And that also those are the things that we're seeing in young athletes, men and women across the gender spectrum, athletics now, so even more than it was when I was young, is so competitive. You have to be the best of the best.
Yeah.
And I think so many young people and young athletes who are wanting to become sports heroes or dancers or whatever are, taking these extreme measures, which are so much more available, discussed, social media. We've talked about how it's just that much easier for them to get. And we actually have a great episode from last year that discusses the use of steroids. And we also talked about that with some families who had worked with their families and kids to try and help their kids through some steroid abuse. It's a great episode. I highly recommend watching it. Welcome back to Awkward Conversations, and welcome to Season 5.
Saving lives means staying informed. Knowing the dangers of using fake prescription pills can help those you care about and keep our community safe. As a parent, educator, neighbor, or friend, we all play a role in building safe and healthy futures for ourselves and our loved ones. Do your part to take the first step today. Visit GetSmartAboutDrugs.com to access education, prevention, and treatment resources. Fake prescription pills laced with fentanyl are deadly. Be their protector. Be informed. Visit GetSmartAboutDrugs.com.
It's Season 5 of Awkward Conversations. Let's get into it. Now, speaking of all of these new weight loss drugs that are out there, we had a kind of a movement where we were talking about body positivity and inclusiveness and all of these things, and it felt like then all of a sudden some of these weight loss drugs came along, and that was all we were talking about, and we didn't really mention the seriousness and the side effects of what can happen with the use of these. Can you tell us a little bit about, some of the things that can happen with using some of these drugs?
I'm not a medical doctor, but I think most people these days are aware of that these weight loss drugs can have very negative side effects. I mean, certainly you're aware if you listen to any of the disclaimers on all the commercials, although they go by so fast, it's hard to get them. But I know one of my best friends has diabetes. She desperately needs this drug, but it has led to a serious allergic reaction. So she's trying to weigh, which is worse, this allergic reaction or the fact that this drug is one of the first things that's actually enabled her to lose weight. So we need to it's not a magic bullet. And I think, we're a culture that loves magic bullets. We love the idea that, oh, good, I can pop a pill and I don't have to worry about dieting anymore, or I can pop a pill and I can be happy. And there's always a negative side to that, and it can often be very negative indeed.
Yeah, I think as somebody who actually has lived in a larger body, continues to live in a larger body, these are discussions I've even had with my physicians at certain points around, again, health at every size, like, embracing the body that you have, and also trying to weigh, like, what are the risks of your health. And I do think a lot of the messaging really now skips from, like, you don't need to know about how your body works. You don't need to know about how nutrition works, or, what exercise is really going to bring you joy, or, kind of, help you, with your health journey. But if you just take this medication, then you'll look better, you'll feel better, and people will like you more.
Right.
And I think that's the message that is really important to discourage, especially with young people, as their bodies are still developing and like figuring out kind of what is their set weight and what are their healthy habits. But there are serious side effects. Again, like I've taken some of these medications, and I think there's things like nausea and a lot of GI upset. There's potential for thyroid cancers is something that they're paying attention to that came up in this initial studies of animals. And so, they're still new, and so we don't know quite yet. And so, I think for families and young people to be, weighing out those risks and asking those questions of physicians if they're a candidate for these medications, which is a huge debate about whether or not these medications should be used at all in a pediatric population. And so being very wary of that. And I think, of course, none of us here today are medical doctors. And so, we don't want to be, the voice of, what is healthy or unhealthy for people. Right. So please check out our Instagram, where we will have an actual medical doctor who's going to talk, through all the points in terms of health and overall wellness.
We're really focusing today on the idea of body image issues, their intersection with substance use disorder, and how we help people build up that self-esteem and build up that feeling of resiliency and acceptance for themselves. One of the things, like I said, I have 2 teenage daughters. One of the things that I tell them often is that, you're born with one body, so figure out how to make peace with it. Figure out how you and this awesome body, this little shell that you got, placed in, figure out how the two of you are going to make this the most successful journey you can. And that's going to look different all the time. And, I really constantly try and talk to my daughters about not exercising because you'll be thin or look better in a bathing suit. We could care less about that in my house. I'm like, let's eat good food, but let's get good exercise because it's good for our mental health, and let's eat some healthy things, but let's have a dessert once in a while too. It's that messaging of all-encompassing health. And I think that's what we really want to focus on with young people. And, social media, again, sort of isolates one thing, which is the visual element, and hyper focuses on that. 30 seconds of getting to know somebody in a reel is not enough to see anything other than what they look on the outside. So,
if I can just add one thing to that, Jodie, because I really love, that's so true to emphasize with our kids about health and their healthy bodies and all of that. But I also I have a daughter who's 37, but I like to emphasize for her the joy and pleasure that our bodies can bring us, and that can be, everything from, walking barefoot in the grass, to swimming in the ocean or being out. There's just so many ways in which our bodies, the importance of our bodies is so much not about how they look or how thin they are, but rather how we feel in them and the kind of joy and pleasure that they can bring to us.
Absolutely.
And hopefully as they grow older, to other people as well.
And that physical health, or the physical mental health connection of it all. Like, like being present and like, I feel the grass below my toes while I'm walking. But like, and how does that, that's my physical self. But gosh, how good does that make you feel? And connecting that wellness pieces all together.
What are some tips that you have on the best ways that parents can help their children navigate these pressures that they see from social media?
Yeah, well, there are so many things to do. And one thing is that although what parents do is incredibly important, I also think that we have to recognize that these are public health problems and that they can't be solved child by child, house by house. That it can't, although we all as parents do absolutely the best we can, the truth is we're raising our kids in a toxic cultural environment, and we're raising them in an environment in which major corporations want to sell them stuff that's going to be very bad for them in order to make a lot of money. And not just sell, also it's profitable for many of these corporations for our kids to feel terrible about themselves. That's profitable. If we all felt great about ourselves, we'd buy a whole lot less stuff. There's that whole public health issue that I think is important too. But in terms of as individual parents, I mean, obviously, I mean, some of the things we've already talked about, what we say to our kids to be, to emphasize about bodies, not about how they look so much. I mean, I think it's absolutely wonderful. Tell your kids they're beautiful, of course. Tell them they're handsome and all of that, as long as it's part of one part of what you're saying to them, so that you also, I like it when parents sort of, especially with their sons, talk about something they did that was kind or compassionate or thoughtful, or for the girls in particular. And again, it doesn't always have to fall in this way, but, girls are encouraged to be kind, even though they often aren't, but boys less so. So, I mean, to compliment girls on being strong and smart and, all of that kind of thing. And so doing all of that, and that, again, does not mean that we can't say, oh, you look so good today or anything like it. It's just to include all these other things as well. And there's also, I think, incredibly important what we say to ourselves in our own heads, because we all, especially women, but I know men do it too, but there's such negative self-talk, that goes on about, I'm too fat, my thighs are too heavy, I don't. You can ask any woman what she doesn't like about her body and she'll be able to tell you, and without even thinking about it. And I urge people to stop that negative self-talk if possible within ourselves, but above all, don't engage in it around your kids. Don't ever say anything negative about your own body in front of your kids, because they're going to hear that. And even if it's not directed at them, in a way it is directed at them. So it's just so important that we, we do what we can. The other thing, of course, is to teach our kids about media literacy. And that means to understand how advertising works, how social media works. And people might think, well, of what age do we need to do that? I'll give you one fact. Babies at the age of 6 months can recognize corporate logos. Wow. And that's the age at which advertisers are starting to target our kids. Wow. And they're targeting them by putting certain fragrances into products so that there'll be an emotional response to those fragrances. They are very, very adept at getting our kids. So we need to start really early to, if you're watching something with your kids, to sort of talk about, what's going on behind the scenes. Or if there's an influencer, for example, that they like, say, well, is that influencer really your friend, or does that influencer want you to, use a certain kind of shampoo? And if it's a certain kind of shampoo, do you think she really uses it, or do you think she's getting paid to tell you that she uses it? I mean, that sounds so simple and simplistic, really, but a lot of kids don't know that and don't think about it, little kids in particular. So start really early on to create awareness and raise consciousness about what's behind all of these messages.
Yeah, it's like a new form of advertising where you feel like, oh, like this person's like my friend on social media.
Right.
Like, I kind of trust them, and I'm always looking at the bottom and be like, #ad, like, or not.
I honestly, again, talking about like people that have access to a platform or something, I don't ever endorse any product that I haven't been using already and then been like, oh, this is something I'm already doing, like reached out to the company, hey, I'd love to work with you. Yeah. I just really try and be cognizant of what we are pushing out there into the world for not just young people, but people my age. I mean, 40-year-old women need to see themselves reflected in all of their normal looking amazingness, that there's nothing wrong with being 42 years old or 64 years old or however. Like, I think that the idea of celebrating our age and not being like, oh, I'm getting old, oh, I'm over the hill. I'm like, I am 42. I love it more than I loved being 32. There's a freedom there, all of these things that I think we really can celebrate and give young people the idea that there's something exciting to look forward to, of not only the changes that your body goes through in puberty and development, but that your brain is developing, and like, oh my gosh, all of these awesome changes that are coming with that. And that it is about so much more than, I always call it the little peanut shell that you come in. It's about way more than that. Yeah. It is about the type of human that you are. And I can guarantee you, and I tell my daughters this all the time, no one will remember 20 years from now how you looked. but they will absolutely remember how you made them feel.
Yeah, 100%.
And so will you.
Yeah.
You won't remember 20 years from now how you looked when you were 20 years old, but you'll remember how you made yourself feel.
Yeah.
And so, I just, I'm so honored to get to have a conversation with you, Dr. Kilbourne, today about such incredibly important topics, and with someone, again, who has been doing this work, like you said, for almost 60 years. I mean, that is really incredible, and the time is never, never more important now.
What you just said, Jodie, was so important about how our attitudes towards our looks, our image, and all of that changes as we age. And when I was in my 20s, I got an enormous amount, and teens, I got a lot of attention for the way that I looked, and I was terrified about the invisibility that I knew was coming, as I grew older. But when I look back, I was not very happy in my 20s. I really wasn't. And I was, addicted to alcohol and tobacco, among other things. And I was constantly worried about how I looked. There's no more anxious group in the world than supermodels, because any flaw, is going to be devastating. And now that I am, in many ways, in terms of the outside world, invisible, which I dreaded for so long, there's a tremendous amount of relief that comes with that. And also, there's so much joy that comes with having lived a long life, having long-term relationships, having, a daughter I adore. So I'm so much happier
Right.
in my older age than I ever was in my youth.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really all about learning to encourage our young people to find that joy in their whole selves before, the age of 40. And hopefully instilling in that from the time that they're young, that your body is a place of enjoyment and health, and you take care of it, and you honor it, and you make other people respect it. And it is yours. It is 100% yours, and you get to experience all of the awesome things of life through your body. So don't discount it. Don't talk bad about it.
Well, and what I love so much about what we've talked about today is I'm hearing some other themes like have been throughout most of our episodes. One is modeling behavior for your children. And so the way that you talk about yourself is modeling to your children how they in turn can talk or should maybe talk about their own bodies, their peanut shell that you mentioned. And also, I think also, thinking about what you focus on is going to grow.
Right.
And so, I loved what you said, Dr. Kilbourne, about, tell your children that they're beautiful, tell them that they're handsome, and also tell them that they're intelligent, and tell them that they're kind, and encourage them to act in kind and empathic ways. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, that will kind of continue to exponentially grow and grow.
Absolutely. Dr. Kilbourne, is there anything that you would like to leave us with, some final thoughts that our viewers should really keep in mind, ways to build good body image, good self-esteem, and healthy values in our young people in this world of constantly being told that they're not enough?
I think I'd like to make sort of a couple of major points. And
Mm-hmm.
one is, as I've said, this is a public health problem, eating disorders, body image, substance, and therefore we need to look at the environment in which we're raising our kids. And it's a very tough time to be a parent. It's really hard. My daughter could not have been better educated about these issues. There could not have been a better educated child on the planet about these issues. I ruined every TV show we ever watched by making comments about it. When my daughter was 11, I said to her, that voice in your head that says, "You're so stupid, you're so dumb, why did you do that?" And she looked at me in amazement and she said, "No, Mommy, the voice in my head is my friend."
Wow, that's
And
beautiful.
that made me cry, because is there anything more that a parent would want to hear than that the voice in their child's head is their friend? And I wish I could say that stayed true, but it didn't. When she became a teenager in this toxic culture, the voice in her head was her friend. And that voice, so much of it comes from advertising, from social media, from peers, but it's a very negative, toxic voice. And in her case, again, she's very well educated about all these issues, but she came very close to developing an eating disorder. So that's why I think that we need to support parents. We need to have resources for parents. We need to fight the companies that are trying to harm our children, and to let parents know that, yes, what we do is incredibly important, but it's if you're feeling like it's incredibly hard, it is. And it's harder probably now than it ever has been for parents in the past.
I also think I hear you saying, like you said, your daughter's like the most educated child on the planet about this. It sounds like you had early conversations with her and that you discuss these things often. And I think that's something that our parents and caregivers can take from this conversation too. It's never too young. Like you said, there's resources to think about how do you have these conversations at a developmental level that's appropriate for your child, and to keep coming back to them. It's, again, not one 60-minute conversation. It's 61-minute conversations over and over.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. The teachable moments, yeah, and they come up all the time, and they can be a lot of fun as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. Dr. Kilbourne, are there any things that you would like to plug that you have coming up? Any books that you would like to recommend? Places that we can find you?
Well, thanks. I mean, I have a website, and on the website is a pretty extensive resource list with all kinds of ideas for parents on many different issues: body image, substance abuse, that kind of thing. So I always encourage people to check that out. And I also have a TED Talk on my website, which in about 15 minutes gives the gist of what I've been talking about for so long. So I just urge people to get active. The other thing that parents can do that I found very helpful is form allies with other parents, that form my daughter and I had a mother-daughter group when she was in the 8th grade, and we could talk about all kinds of things. And it just, at that age, she was more able to hear what other mothers had to say than what I had to say.
Absolutely.
And vice versa. I mean, so I think that kind of thing, it can feel very lonely in this culture to try to raise healthy children. So finding your allies wherever you can, with of course fathers as well, and men, to get together and try and just get support for what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your support today, Dr. Kilbourne. Amy, thank you as always for joining me on another fabulous episode of Awkward Conversations. All of our notes will be in our show notes, in the links that you can find everything that Dr. Kilbourne has mentioned and that we've brought up. So thank you for joining us for another episode of Awkward Conversations.
We could talk for hours. I'm sorry it's gone by so fast. You're doing great work.
Thank you so much.
That's it for today's episode of Awkward Conversations. I'm Jodie Sweetin. I'll see you next time. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play parenting. This week, we're looking at the role of sports as a game changer for more than just the scoreboard. Sports teach kids to show up, work hard, support their teammates, and keep going when things get tough. Because sports aren't just about trophies and highlight reels. They're about raising kids who know how to win with grace, lose with grit, and bounce back stronger every single time. And parents, we're giving you the tools to turn every practice, every game, and even those car rides home into moments that build character, resilience, and substance-free futures.
Any kid from any circumstance or any upbringing really has an opportunity to change his or her trajectory in their life through a positive activity like sports. There's also this leadership and life skill development aspect, and the post-high school planning in their career development really are the things that kind of pop out. And then there's community leadership and community impact.
Being involved in physical education, being on a sports team, being more active in general, we actually have seen that is improving and increasing a sense of school connectedness. And school connectedness is a protective factor. If you have that emotional connection, you feel that peer support, there might be a coach or a parent or a teacher that cares about you and you feel connected to, we're seeing that be an incredible overall health benefit.
When you're at home, you have your duties at home of being a good son, a good brother. When you're at school, it's all about academics. But when you step on that field, when you go to that park, there's that physical release, there's that emotional release to where you're gonna sweat a little bit, you're gonna have fun, you're gonna be present in the moment. And I feel like because there's not a lot of spaces as it was maybe when we were coming up, kids need that now more than ever. They need that release. They need to be able to know that they can go and just be themselves and be present and be in the moment playing the sport of their choice.
Be in the moment and off social media.
Absolutely.
Make sure to check out GetSmartAboutDrugs.com. Parents, caregivers, you can find so many resources of great information there about how to talk to your kids and make these conversations a little less awkward. A huge thank you to the ELPS DAP, which is the largest all-volunteer nationwide drug awareness program, and also a huge thanks to the DEA for their outreach program and for making this possible.
The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Awkward Conversation series are solely those of the individuals, speakers, commentators, experts, and/or hosts involved, and do not necessarily reflect nor represent those of the production, associates, or broadcaster, or any of its employees. Production is not responsible and does not verify for accuracy any of the information contained in the series available for viewing. The primary purpose of this series is to educate and inform. This series does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. This series is available for private, non-commercial use only. The production, broadcaster, or its channel cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed during this program.